This podcast is brought to you by Meteorate.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to podcast number 8 of the Seriously Funny Wellbeing Show. I'm your co-host, Homer Papantonio, and with me, I'm proud again to introduce the unstoppable, the irrevocable, the irrepressible Dr. Ross Walker. Ross, how do you do?
Hello, Homer. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for listening or watching, depending on what you're doing.
Great. So the subject of today's podcast is Healthspan versus lifespan. But before we go on to it, a month ago, Ross, I don't know whether you know, we had a little athletic event known as the Paris Olympic Games. You familiar with that? There was a
I am aware of that, Homer, because I've often said that anyone who would swim Paris is insane.
I know, wasn't that? What's the name of that river there?
The Seine.
The Seine, yeah.
That's
insane,
the joke.
Yeah.
Insane.
Okay, that's good.
I'm sure everyone else got the joke. It was very quick of you, Homer.
And you won't stop at one. I'm on time delay when it comes to jokes like that. So we had this event, and one of my scribes who assists me in creatively writing my keynote presentations is none other than the Olympic poet himself, Robert Raftery, who's written arguably, Ross, one of the most motivational and inspirational Olympic poems ever written. It's known universally as We're Going for Gold. And instead of an opening joke like we historically have on this podcast, give me just a few minutes to recite this poem to all of you. So I've become Homer the Greek poet here, who wrote the Iliad, and what else did he write, Ross?
Wasn't something about Troy?
The Iliad and the Odyssey.
Odyssey, that's it.
And we're all on an odyssey in life, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well-being is an odyssey.
Oh.
So I want you to picture being in the Olympic Village with all your fellow athletes. Ross, you're in the veterans soccer team, the Australian soccer team. You played a lot of soccer, didn't you?
I played a lot of soccer, but my knee now is replaced and will stop me from doing anything like that.
Well, even if a knee replacement, you've got in there.
Yeah.
You've made the team.
I'm in the team.
And it's the old swimming coach, Laurie Lawrence, reciting this to you, and it goes like this. It's time to turn good into greatness. It's a biggie, old mates, and we're in it. It's happened. You're here, and you're champions, and there's gold in the wings. You can win it. You're sitting out there, and you're sucking in air, and your heart's in your mouth. I can tell it. Mate, I'm talking to you. It's Laurie True Blue. There's gold in the wings. Can't you smell it? You've done the hard yards. You're the cream of the crop. You're fighters. You're focused. And you'll pump till you drop. Tomorrow you'll churn and the water will boil as you tear at the air and you rip at the soil. Now go out and blitz them, but be in no doubt for Australia to win. Let the animal out. They'll haunt you, they'll taunt you, and they'll spit in your face. Then I'll watch as our flag paint a smile on your face. As the cameras engage you and capture that tear, and your mates all around you erupt in a cheer. Stand proud, mate, and wear it by the rings and the flames, and cherish your moment of gold at the games. But you're thinking about home, and your thoughts start to roam. Can't really believe that you're here. You're on hollowed ground, and that magical sound, and the world trembles, echoes the cheer, as that rectangled rag of our great Aussie flag rockets above. You're there, you're the pride of the fleet, and the world at your feet, and our anthem blast in the air. You reckon I weighed you down that long track, and at times I admit that I did. But, mate, I can't tell you right here and right now I'm as proud as a parent can be of a kid. I don't want to tell you I love you, but I'll tell you right now I won't fail you. And nor will that crew of that great ship that's just parked out the front called Australia. So go, my golden beauties, don't put your gold on hold. Now is the moment, this is your time, and I love you as much as I would were you mine. Get out there, get at 'em, and rip 'em apart with the blood of your country ablaze in your heart. The medals are here, yours, mates, to have it or hold. And mate, and Ross, stuff the silver, we're going for gold.
Very good. Excellent.
Good, great poem, isn't it?
Wonderful poem.
Would you be motivated?
Absolutely, but wonderful achievement, of course, by our Olympic team as well. So it was
best
great
ever,
for
wasn't
everybody.
it? Best ever performance.
Absolutely,
it was great. So, and motivation's a big thing with well-being too. To exercise, to be on the diet. That's a subject for another podcast. You think?
It's a very good subject. Happy to bring that one in. I'm just writing down notes as we speak.
So let's move on to medical news, Ross. Cancer and pesticides.
Yeah, this is interesting because if you ask anyone what's the commonest cause of cancer, they'll probably say cigarette smoking. And they're certainly right as far as it comes to lung cancer. Not all people who suffer lung cancer are cigarette smokers. Probably 20% of lung cancer is due to other factors that have nothing to do with cigarette smoking. But you don't typically think of things like pesticides as being a cause of cancer. But this study has recently come out, and it's suggested that there is a link between specific pesticides that are commonly used, such as Roundup, and different types of relatively common cancers, such as, I'll give you some examples, leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, bladder, colon, lung, pancreatic, and different combinations of cancers as well, with a particular link, as I said, to things like Roundup or glyphosate, which is Roundup.
Yeah.
And so, what they're suggesting is that these pesticides probably cause as many cancers as do cigarette smoking. But the difference is we don't know we're being exposed to these pesticides because the foods that we eat have been treated with the pesticides to stop the bugs from attacking them. And it's the same thing as you see a lot of these sports people sucking on these water bottles that are made of plastic. And they think, oh, no, it's good for me. I'm keeping myself hydrated, flushing the kidneys out, etc., etc. And this nonsense about how we should be having 8 glasses of water a day on top of the normal fluid we take. Most of the people I know that just spend half the day in the bathroom.
Yeah.
But the point is with this, if you're sucking on these plastic bottles, especially if you reuse them, the plastics are just leaching into the water and causing all sorts of health issues, which is a topic for another day. So that's the medical news of the day, is that is this specific link. And so we really have to look at industry, the people that are using these things, and change the narrative.
Russell, I find that very, very depressing, what you just told me then, because I know for a fact that we can't avoid these pesticides. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Buy an apple, whatever. How do we...
And look, open your fridge and tell me something that's not in plastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got a big thing for plastic, haven't you?
Well, when you and I were kids, we were told that plastic was going to save the world. We stopped cutting down trees. That's worked, hasn't it?
A lot of people can't remember that movie, Ross.
Yeah.
That Dustin Hoffman one. Future of medicine, 1 drop of blood to diagnose diseases.
Yeah, well, you probably remember a few years back, a company called Theranos. The CEO of Theranos is now in jail for suggesting that she'd achieved this. And so they said, we can take 1 drop of blood and make all these diagnoses. But now a particular lab in Germany is using a thing called infrared light spectroscopy and is doing this. You see, because the interesting thing is when you get any disease at all, whether it's heart disease, whether it's diabetes, whether it's cancer, Alzheimer's disease, you get these biomarkers spilling into the bloodstream, what we call molecular footprints. So, for example, if you've got a very early cancer coming from somewhere, the DNA of that cancer, which is different to your DNA, can spill little bits of chemicals into the bloodstream. And so now what we're talking about is just 1 drop of blood, just a pinprick on the finger, and you can send it off and find out what your risk is for disease or whether any disease is brewing in the body.
Yeah, you froze for a moment there, Ross. Yeah, that's... So, that drop... So, when you said that, when that drop, like that cancer marker, can that go away if it's minuscule by itself?
Oh, sure.
It can.
It doesn't... Look, this is the thing that people don't realise.
Yeah.
there is no test in medicine that's 100% accurate. Even, let me be a bit indelicate here, an autopsy is done by human beings, but equally, just because you might have something that suggests you have a cancer, it doesn't mean you have a cancer. It just means there's the potential that may be brewing, and the doctors should look a bit further to make sure there's no signs of clinical cancer, and you should be checked more often to make sure that it doesn't occur. Because the earlier you treat these things, the better off they are. But just because, for example, you might have this drop of blood and it says, oh yes, there's indication here that you have an early lung cancer. It doesn't mean that we've got to take your lungs out and try to find the tumour, but it does mean we should be doing scans to see if there's any evidence of tumour and survey you pretty regularly rather than say, I'll come back in 5 years. So that's what that's telling us.
And scans are not the only way to ascertain that?
Well, look, the best way with any condition is to biopsy the organ as far as cancer goes and find evidence of the cancer there. But scans are a good way of saying whether you have solid evidence for the cancer. So all I'm saying is this is just another layer of benefits for investigating people. It's not available yet. It's being trialled, but when it is available, it may become standard of care, just as it is becoming standard of care in cancer management now for the liquid biopsy. So you just have a blood test and it looks for these circulating DNA markers.
Yeah. So this is a controversial one. Body of evidence, vaccinations decrease dementia.
Yeah. Well, see, this is interesting because you've got all the anti-vaxxers coming out of the woodwork, especially some people are not anti-vaxxers, but they become anti-vaxxers because of the COVID vaccines. And that's another topic altogether. All I'm doing is presenting this particular evidence, a huge study of just under 950,000 people over the age of 65, and it found that, I'll give you some examples. And this is a follow-up for about 4 years. Those who had a yearly flu vaccine over the age of 65 had a 40% reduction in progression to dementia. So they started the study dementia-free, 40% less dementia just by having a flu vaccine every year. Now, personally, if I don't have a flu vaccine every year, I come down like a ton of bricks with influenza. My body loves influenza. I hate it. And I've had it seriously about 8 times through my life. So I always get my flu vaccine.
So
but
was a 40% decrease because they were dead from the vaccination?
Don't be ridiculous.
Just a joke.
No,
Seriously funny.
It's not a good joke.
Okay.
But also then they looked at things like diphtheria, tetanus, 30% reduction, shingles vaccine, 25% reduction, pneumococcal vaccine, 27% reduction, and they compared that against the 3 new antibody treatments against Alzheimer's disease, and they had somewhere between a 25 to 35% reduction, but with a huge amount, a 30% reduction increase in brain swelling. So what we're saying is the vaccinations probably were better than the newer treatments for Alzheimer's disease without the side effects. So it's just saying, especially for people over the age of 50 and especially over the age of 60, please have your regular vaccinations. Be up to date with vaccination.
Okay. So what, Ross, you told me about this study from the University of Georgia, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, might encourage a new population to start looking into omega-3 supplements as well, with people with a genetic predisposition to high cholesterol. The researchers found that participants who reported taking fish oil supplements have lower lipid levels than predicted, especially for total cholesterol. But it also said that it may counteract the genetic predisposition that they have to high cholesterol.
Yeah, well, it doesn't change their genes. Nothing actually changes the genes.
Yeah.
But there's this new emerging field of epigenetics, and epigenetics is the environmental effect on the genes. And that's again, we discussed, I think in the last podcast, we discussed the MTHFR gene, and that's a really important part of epigenetics. But what we're talking about here is the effects that omega-3 has on the overall cholesterol profile. Now, let me make a few points. You made the point, genetic cholesterol issues. Cholesterol doesn't have much to do with what you eat. Cholesterol is typically genetic and metabolic. So metabolic is the way the body works, and that is very much determined by your genes and your environment. But people think, oh no, my cholesterol's high, so therefore I've got to go on a low cholesterol diet to get the cholesterol out of my system. Complete nonsense. 70% of your cholesterol is made in your liver, regardless of your diet. So if you have a genetic predisposition to driving up your cholesterol, having a bad diet will drive it up even further. So if you then take the omega-3s, it then modulates your cholesterol. Now here's the thing. Everyone says, and we have spoken about this before, but it's important to reinforce it. Everyone said LDL cholesterol is bad, HDL cholesterol is good, and that is simplistic nonsense. And one of the things that omega-3s do is convert you from small LDL, which is bad, to large LDL, small HDL to large HDL, and drop your triglycerides. So there's a lot of evidence emerging now around omega-3s that can do all of these things for you.
But it's real diverse, isn't it, omega-3, what it can do for you mentally, emotionally, even with moods and depression states.
It's just a good health tonic. And the point is, a lot of conservative doctors say, the evidence for omega-3 is pretty weak. But they're looking at studies that were done that only for a few years. And I agree, with any form of supplements, you've got to be in it for the long haul. So a little known institution in America called the Mayo Clinic, they published a thing in the Mayo Clinic proceedings a few years back looking at the omega-3 studies, and they found that studies up to 5 years, omega-3s didn't do much. But when you looked at the studies beyond 5 years, in my specialty, there was a 20% reduction in cardiac disease in people who took omega-3s for a long period of time. So the message from this is, if anyone wants to think about supplementation, and as I said, it's only 10% of your management, 80% lifestyle, 10% pharmaceuticals if you need them, and 10% supplements. But if you want to think about this, don't do it for a few months and say, didn't feel much different, so I stopped, which most people do, by the way. After 12 months of any medical suggestion or medical program, 50% of people have stopped. So what I say to people is, be in it for the long haul. That's the message.
Okay. So, Ross, our main topic for this week's podcast is health span versus lifespan. This is a subject very close to my heart, especially given the propensity for diet, exercise, and the right attitude to affect the quality of one's life. So it's important to approach the longevity movement with a critical mindset and recognize that the pursuit of longevity should not come at the cost of quality of life. And it's intriguing, Ross, how the pursuit of immortality can lead to a focus on quantity over quality of life, and this attitude can detract from the meaningful experiences and relationships that make life worth living. So longevity alone doesn't always address the health of those latter years. So, Ross, lifespan is the number of years someone lives from birth until death, while health span is the number of years someone is healthy without chronic and debilitating disease. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And look, you mentioned, you're talking there about lifespan, that's quantity of life as opposed to quality of life. And one thing I just want to put in there, Homer, did you think about what did our parents do to kill boredom before the internet? Well, look, I asked my 16 brothers and sisters and they couldn't answer either. So anyhow, let's get on to this.
Yeah.
And because there's a few points I want to make throughout all of this. Firstly, in our modern world, the average lifespan for a male is about 80 years old, for a female about 84. But we have pockets around the world that we've discussed before, the blue zones, where they have enormous longevity, where people often live up to the age of 100, but they're living well. And you see, I don't want to live till I'm 100 if I'm suffering a chronic illness for 20 years. And this is the issue. I want to make a couple of points here. That firstly, there's a condition called frailty. Now, frailty, and I'll give you what I call the frail scale in a second, but this might shock you. Over the age of 65, Homer, 6% of people score positively on the frail index, which means they don't want to be there.
Yep.
38% of people are pre-frail. So if you've got 3 or more of these conditions I'm about to tell you, you score frail. if you've got one or two of these, you are pre-frail. Now, this is over the age of 65. So we're not talking about particularly old people. So let me go through how you know whether you're frail or not. Because I don't want people to be frail. I want people to be in their 60s, 70s and 80s and still be vibrant people. So the frail scale, let me go through it. And it's strangely, it's the acronym FRAIL. So F is for fatigue. So the first question you either answer yes or no to is, do you feel tired most of the time? And many people say, yes, I do. And when people are fatigued, and this is, again, I'll write this down because it's another good idea, we should have a section where we just discuss fatigue and the different causes of fatigue, but you don't just put up with tiredness, you find out why. Okay, so that's very important. Are you tired? The R in FRAIL stands for resistance. So the resistance is, can you easily walk up a flight of stairs? Can you easily get out of a chair? So that's R. So yes or no to that question. The A is ambulation. Can you walk freely around the block without any issues at all? Now, I know you're a supreme athlete. We're not talking about you, but I'm saying people listening should be saying yes or no to these ones. The I is illness. Now, if you have 5 or more illnesses, you should answer yes to that. You say, well, that's a hell of a lot of illnesses. But we're talking about obesity, diabetes, hypertension, arthritis, osteoporosis, or some established disease like heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, whatever. So if you can say yes to 5 of those, that's another point. And then finally, and this is an interesting one, is loss of weight. So unintentional loss of weight, more than 5% of your initial weight, is another point towards you being frail. And so what I'm saying to you, the numbers, 6% of people over 65 frail, 38% pre-frail, which is pretty disturbing when you think about it, because what that's saying is many people from 65 onwards are living their life in a poor state, in poor health. So they might survive for 15, 20 years, but half their life they're spending doctor's surgeries, getting more pills to try and make them feel a bit better.
So it really comes back to what your definition of health is. Like, to me, I've said this before, and it's based on that great book, which hopefully you'll read one day, about the power of full engagement in life. It talks about what it is, what state you need to be in, and that's being physically energized, which you get from exercise, of course. And the irony with exercise, that we've explained it time and time again, is that how many people do you hear, Ross, saying, I haven't got the energy to exercise? The irony is you need to expend energy to create it.
No, of course.
That's the real irony to it. And then the other one is emotionally connected, mentally focused, and spiritually aligned, which means that you work within, ethical and moral parameters in life. That in a broad way is what my definition of health is. What you were alluding to before was an interesting definition there, where you bring in frailty, but there's all those other factors and the attitudinal aspect to health too.
Well, I talk about the 5 keys to ultimate wellness, or the 5 keys to ultimate health. And they are, firstly, to not be sick. So to prevent disease is number 1. Number 2 is to have the energy that we need. We need to discuss fully about energy and fatigue and whatever, and that's another podcast. Number 3 is body wellness. So keeping your weight down, keeping yourself physically fit, treating musculoskeletal problems, dealing with hearing, with sight, all of those things. Number 4 is mental wellness. So keeping the little grey cells working. So your brain wants to be active for as long as you can, be as sharp as you can, and then finally emotional wellness, as you've alluded to, and I think emotional wellness encompasses having belief and being a spiritual person and whatever. I'm not talking religion; I have no right to do that, but I'm just saying it's an all-encompassing aspect of being healthy, and also I want to make a couple of points, which certainly brings in the whole exercise thing, is 2 things here: osteoporosis and sarcopenia. Now, osteoporosis, everyone would give a weak Reader's Digest definition. It's weak bones as you get older, basically. And this is the point I make, is that the peak of life is 30 and it's all downhill from there. So no high performance athlete is as good as they were in their 30s as they were in their 20s, because they're working up to the peak of their life. And so osteoporosis starts at 30, sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle mass, starts at 30. And when you hit 50 and the hormones go south, it accelerates both those conditions.
Can I just interrupt you on that, Ross? When you said that, I immediately thought of endurance female athletes who tend, as they get older, over 35 even, they're more viable endurance animals, from one of the better word. There's a disproportionate number of female athletes over 30 have won, like, the New York Marathon, and they can maybe get into endurance more. So I was just saying that.
I'm not saying this is a blanket rule for everyone.
Yeah.
There are people, and everything is genetically primed. So, for example, 10% of the population are born with slightly defective mitochondrial function. And those people they're the people that hated sport. The people who always came last in the cross countries. And they're the people often in their 20s and 30s get Epstein-Barr virus, and it plunges them into chronic fatigue syndrome because their mitochondria just can't stand the attack by the virus. And those people there never really good at sport. Then you've got other people, most of us are here in the middle, but then you've got the 10% of people who become elite athletes, and of those you'll get the people like Usain Bolt who've got the very strong, fast twitch fibers, but then the endurance runners have the slower twitch fibers, and they're much better at those sort of sports. And it's interesting, our genes will make us attracted to those sort of things. So if we've got the lousy mitochondria, we're not attracted to sport. But if we've got a great mitochondria, then you get attracted to sport, and some people just give it a go. But I've got patients who say to me, "Oh, look, doctor, I always try to play sport, but I just was never good at it. I never really enjoyed it, and I never really got fitness like my friends who were getting fitness." And it's because they're in that 10%, that lower 10%.
It's interesting. The exercise physiologist, when I did the course many moons ago, he describes fitness as being having enough energy to do what you want to do in a day and having a little bit left over.
Yeah, no, that's a good
very
point.
Broad. And he also said that if you were an athlete when you were 18, 20, 21, every pound that you, and you know what that weight is, just say you were 72 kilos as an athlete and you're now 82 kilos, the theory was that every kilo that you've put on is fat.
Yeah.
I find that true.
That was the other point I was going to make. In terms of muscle loss, we lose 3 to 5% of our muscle bulk per decade after the age of 30. So that's why it's so important, especially as you get older, that you maintain some resistance training. So picking up light to moderate weights to keep your muscles bulky. And I personally do about 15 to 20 minutes of weights and stretching every morning of my life. And I do 30 minutes on my bike, which is sitting just over my shoulder here, every day as well, because it's important to have that 2/3 cardio, 1/3 resistance training. And as far as osteoporosis goes, just a few facts there that are important. Then I want to move on to the final topic in this, is that with osteoporosis, 5 to 7 years after the onset of menopause, women can lose up to 20% of their bone mass, 20%. And 25% of women over the age of 65 have definite osteoporosis, and 5% of men. So when women hit 65, I think it's really important they have a DEXA scan of their bones to measure their osteoporosis potential, because there's so many things you can do for osteoporosis, and that is, I'll just write this down, another podcast, talk about osteoporosis specifically.
So what's your view on that, Ross, in terms of, like, we know that weight-bearing exercise is really good for avoiding osteoporosis, and even if you have osteoporosis, to do weight-bearing.
Absolutely.
Would you prefer walking to weight training or running to weight training?
No. I think we should do both. I don't think it should be either or.
Yeah.
I think people should have 2/3 cardio, 1/3 resistance training. So again, the osteoporosis, I think we should specifically focus on that in another podcast. But I just want to finish off with end-of-life care, because I think the way end-of-life care is being managed by many people, not everybody, is not particularly good. And personally, now people might bristle at what I'm about to say, but I personally do not believe anyone should spend more than a week in an advanced nursing home care, because there's a wonderful drug called morphine that can hasten the end of your demise. So I believe in prolonging everyone's life, but no one's death. And this is the issue. People now get into nursing homes, and there are 5 criteria here that I go by with this. Firstly, when you have developed Alzheimer's disease where you no longer recognize your relatives. Number 2 is where you have terminal cancer, of course. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Number 3, where you have some disabling chronic pain syndrome that nothing else is touching, where your life is made a misery by severe pain for whatever it is. And so you have no quality of life because of this pain. And that's not particularly common, but there are some people where the pain is just so bad, they just don't want to live anymore. Now, these last 2 are pretty obvious as well. A disabling stroke or another end-stage neurologic disease, and I'm not talking about a mild intermittent multiple sclerosis, but I'm talking about something like multiple sclerosis or motor neurone disease where you're wheelchair bound. And so for all of those 5 criteria, and the last, some of these I call the bum wiping rule. If someone else has to wipe your backside and that's not going to change, your life has finished. So what I'm saying is these people should not be languishing in nursing homes for 6, 7, 8 months. I'm saying you should give them high-dose morphine every 4 hours, whether the medical staff think they need it or not. The relatives should be asking for this, and it's a legitimate thing to do because it's putting that person out of their suffering. They're not going to survive. They're not going to get better. We know that, and once you've had 2 doctors say that this person will not get better, then if it was me, I've said to my relatives, if this ever happened to me, I just want high-dose morphine. You get put into this peaceful oblivion. You have no terror of death. It's not like euthanasia. I don't want to get into a euthanasia discussion, but euthanasia is I'm going to be killed at 6 o'clock tonight. So you're thinking about that. Whereas if you're given high-dose morphine every 4 hours, over a day or 2 or 3 or 4, you go into this peaceful oblivion and then you pass on peacefully with a dignified death.
Yeah, Ross, I can speak from personal experience. All I can say is thank God for morphine. Yeah. Thank God for morphine, because my mum and dad were, when we was in hospital, other than an aged care home, and morphine helped immeasurably. And it might be the silent euthanasia that it's medical people...
it's not euthanasia per se.
Yeah.
What it is compassionate medicine. Yes. Where you are ending suffering. It's not just the suffering of the person, it's the suffering of the relatives. So 2 people or a person that you've loved and seen have a dignified, enjoyable life, but having this miserable death where they go on for 3, 4, 5 months in pain or someone else wiping their backside, it's just hideous.
Yeah.
And I have never heard anyone justify that. But tragically, it's happening all the time. I've seen situations, Homer, where people with end-stage disease are given antibiotics because they get pneumonia. We used to call in the old days pneumonia the old person's friend. So I think it's really important we rethink this. I think that if anyone's listening who's got a relative in this position, realise you are their best advocate. You're not killing them. You're allowing them to have a dignified, peaceful, beautiful death. Not a horrible death where they're suffering.
It's a controversy where the ethical question is we can't play God.
You're not playing God.
I know.
You're just hastening the inevitable and not allowing someone or not letting someone suffer for more than a few days. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So that's my overview here of lifespan versus Healthspan. And I think we should all be aiming for Healthspan, not lifespan, because I think that's the key.
I've got it with this, and it's relevant to this topic. A very good friend of mine who Alan Pease.
Yeah, lovely man. Beautiful.
Lovely, great body, great speaker. Not as good as us, but he's okay, isn't he?
He's very good. Very good.
He I don't know whether you followed his, he's freezing himself when he dies.
He's what?
He's freezing himself cryogenically.
Okay.
And he wants to come back whenever. Is that the future? I mean,
look, no. I don't think there's any evidence that stuff works. Let's not get onto that. But look, let's finish up with this has been an interesting topic. It's something people need to think about. But again, the best way to maintain a good health span is to practice those 5 keys of being healthy. I'll say them again quickly. No addictions, good sleep, good eating and less of it. Second best drug on the planet, 3 to 5 hours every week of moderate exertion, 2/3 cardio, 1/3 resistance. And most importantly, happiness. Listening to the Seriously Funny Wellbeing Podcast.
And you are happy if you're healthy.
Absolutely.
Clap your hands. Boom, boom. Okay. So questions from the listener. This is from Ruthie Lawson from somewhere in Australia. She did.
Yep.
Dr. Walker, love your show. Is excess serotonin syndrome a gut imbalance? And how can you balance your gut if all the good food like fermented foods, fruit and veggies are high in serotonin and should be avoided with this condition?
Yeah, no, look, the excess serotonin syndrome is something that's I won't say it's not medically accepted, but some people believe in it, some people don't. And what it can do is make you feel very anxious, the heart can race, sweating, all of those sort of things that go with it. But it's got nothing to do with eating good quality fruits and vegetables. Now, Ruth is absolutely correct. 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. But it's not as if you have too much of this stuff that has like tryptophan's the precursor step, which is in an amino acid that's in good quality foods. Tryptophan makes serotonin, but it's not as if you have a lot of tryptophan, you're going to get excessive serotonin and get the serotonin syndrome. It means there's defective mechanisms, that you're not getting the right checkpoint mechanisms that are stopping the excessive serotonin spilling into the bloodstream. And I think a lot of it is again based around anxiety, and I think gut dysbiosis is part of this as well. So I don't know anyone living in our society who has a totally healthy gut for all the reasons of gut dysbiosis. So the fact that we're having so many processed foods, the fact that less than 10% of people are having 2 or 3 pieces of fruit per day, 3 to 5 servings of vegetables per day, less than 10%. And those who do have the lowest rates of heart disease and cancer and Alzheimer's in the community just by having the fruits and vegetables every day. So I think that's very important. And I also think it's very important to take a high quality probiotic. Now, again, because I'm a doctor and what I say in Australia is restricted by the TGA and by the health medical boards, I can't give you the name of what I believe to be the best probiotics in Australia, but people should be trying to seek those names and taking that alongside having their fruits and vegetables.
What about yogurt, sauerkraut? Does that cut it as a probiotic?
Yeah, they're very good. Yogurt's got good probiotics. The sauerkraut's prebiotic, kefir, all of those things, very good prebiotics. One of my best mates, he's quite overweight and he loves every sort of food on the planet apart from kimchi. And he hates kimchi, and that's a very, very good prebiotic.
Yeah, the other thing that I had religiously ever since I had my calcium score test, which is a good lead into the next question, is nattokinase.
Nattokinase, which
natto is a fermented soybean that you have in soup. Tastes foul unless you have it with miso soup, and I've actually grown to like it. So, and that's pretty good too. And it's interesting there what you mentioned too, the connection between gut health and brain health.
Oh, of course, 90% of serotonin made in the gut.
Yeah,
and so in fact we saw the rates of depression rise when this whole nonsense about people going to low-fat diets because low-fat diets are low-protein diets. You don't get as much tryptophan. You don't make as much serotonin. It's complete nonsense, all this low-fat rubbish.
Next question is Dr. Ross. This is from a Greek man, Jimmy Kostopoulos.
Ah, there we go.
A great Greek name. Well, his question is about, am I allowed to do an accent? I don't know. The Hardy matter of zero calcium score. He asks, Dr. Ross, can you have a zero calcium score but still have a substantial amount of soft plaque floating around, which is often more dangerous than calcified plaque?
A great question, and the answer is yes, but it's very rare. And see, this is the reason why many of my colleagues wrongly say that a CT coronary angiogram, where you squirt it intravenously with dye, gets beautiful pictures of your arteries, should be done as a screening test for heart disease, and it is not a screening test for heart disease. The screening test for heart disease is the coronary calcium score. Then Jimmy's going to come out and say, but hang on, zero calcium score, high-grade block. Yes, probably 1 in 500 people who have CT angiography will be in that category. That does not justify the 499 people having a CT coronary angiogram and paying the extra $1,000 it is for that test, being further irradiation for the test, an intravenous injection that can damage your kidneys, or you could have an anaphylactic reaction to, and also many people need to take a beta blocker before the test as well. So it's a lot of fiddling to do a CT angiogram. And a study that was in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology 2018 looked at the predictive value of a coronary calcium score against CT coronary angiography, and it found the calcium score was a better predictor. So for the rare cases where people have a zero score but a high-grade block, it doesn't mean the calcium score was wrong, because it just means they don't have severe atherosclerosis, because there are other causes of blockages other than atherosclerosis, just not as common. So what I do is if my patients have symptoms and I do a stress echo on them and it's a bit equivocal, then I'll go to a CT angiogram. Then it's covered by Medicare. It's not going to cost them $1,000. But if anyone out there has had a CT coronary angiogram as a screening test for heart disease and they didn't have to pay $1,000 for it, then their doctors were ordering that illegally and they shouldn't have had it done.
So the CT coronary angiogram shows both calcification and soft plaque.
Well, you have to have a calcium score done at the same time as you had it. It's the same technology. Same technology. One is no injection. The other one's an injection. But it does suggest there's soft plaque in some people, but it typically doesn't pick it up. Typically, if you've got a zero score, you don't have a block. But very, very... Look, I've got occasional patients who've had a low calcium score. Saw a guy 2 days ago within that situation, a calcium score of 11, still needed a stent in his arteries. But it's just think of it logically. The more atherosclerosis you have, which is what the calcium score tells you, the higher the score, the higher the atherosclerosis, therefore the higher the risk for heart disease. But as I said right at the start when we were chatting, there is no test in medicine that is 100% predictive. Nothing is. So that's why that's why a good doctor looks at the overall picture. So if I see a patient who's got symptoms or other strong risk factors for heart disease, but a zero calcium score, I don't say to them, go away, I don't want to see you again. I say to them, any hint of symptoms, you ring me straight away, and I want to see you again because you're at high risk in maybe 12 months' time. But the zero calcium score really means your risk over the next 10 years is still very low. Calcium score over 400, don't read Tolstoy unless you do something about it.
Yeah. And obviously a subject for another podcast is whether we can actually dramatically reduce the level of calcium buildup in the arteries.
Wrong question. Absolute wrong question. Because I don't care about the calcium.
You don't care?
Calcium's not an issue.
Because I'm happy to share 240 for me, right?
Okay,
and
yeah.
At the time, and I've been religiously having vitamin K2 and natto and everything else. And you at the time said, well, it's not bad. I'm on the cusp of putting you onto statins.
Oh, no, you should be on a statin. Okay, you just didn't want to take it.
Okay.
No, but let me just make this point. There's a donut, okay, with a hole in the middle. That's where the blood's going. Yeah. The fat builds up in the wall like this. As the fat builds up, the body throws in calcium to act as a scaffold to stop it from breaking down. The problem's fat, not calcium. So what we want to see on your next scan or anyone's next scan is not what the calcium score is doing, but what the plaque volume's doing. So when we do the scan, we measure the amount of calcium that's sitting there, but also the plaque volume, the size of the plaque. I want to see that I'm shrinking that down, which is what I do with the 80% lifestyle, 10% pharmaceuticals, which you should be on, and the 10% supplements as well.
So why are people so hung up about the calcium score then?
No, well, because it's not just the calcium score, it's calcium score and plaque volume. People are hung up about the calcium score because they wrongly believe that it's the calcium that's causing the problem. The calcium's a marker for how much fat you have.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Final question from Lisa, Port Macquarie. Are carbohydrates important for endurance athletes, and do athletes need to increase their carbohydrates to perform well? Well, I can probably answer part of this for you, Ross.
Go for it.
And say, well, traditionally, historically, having competed in cycling events for close to 25, 30 years and triathlon and everything else, carbs were always seen as the main energy source, the glycogen in your muscles, efficient fuel, and you'll go. But I think there has been, it is implicated with diabetes, high carb diet, everything else. I think protein's great to repair the muscle. But I think just a moderate carb diet for endurance athletes is really important because you do perform better generally. I'm talking about people that ride maybe 20 hours a week or train, do an hour and 2 hours of running every day or anything like that. I think after you start using your carbohydrate source, and that's another thing why caffeine was always very popular, because apparently fat is a far more efficient fuel source than carbohydrates. And what the caffeine does, if you have a cup of coffee 1 or 2 hours before an event, it displaces all your fat tissues. I don't know whether that's a myth or whatever, but what's your view on carbohydrates?
My view, I don't have problems with people doing a bit of carb loading before a big event, because as you so rightly say, they do get a good carbohydrate source then to burn off quickly, and they will burn it off when they do high level activity. And see, here's the problem, that we're talking about one small group of the population who are elite athletes. And the rules for them, their mitochondria is different, the way their muscles work different, their muscle bulk is different. So it's different to the bog standard person just wanting to do, like someone like me who I've never run a marathon, never would run a marathon. There's a perfectly good bus service. Why anyone would do it's just beyond me. But what I'm saying is for people who want to do that, yes, bit of carb loading is not going to hurt. I don't have a problem with it. But for the rest of us, what we should be doing is following sensible eating habits, which is a thing called the Mediterranean diet, which is the only diet that really works.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. Well, that's all we have today, Ross.
Absolutely.
We thank all of you for tuning in. Please share this podcast with all your friends on social media. Our website is seriouslyfunnywellbeing.com, and it's bye-bye from me and...
Bye.
Thanks, Ross.